There are men whose names alone can empty a room. Men who can buy buildings, judges, silence, almost anything money touches. But there is one thing none of them can buy: the belief that a stranger will be good to them for nothing in return. Kwang-suno Park was one of those men. At 52, he ran one of the most feared syndicates on the East Coast, out of a penthouse in Manhattan that most people would never be allowed to even look at. Tonight, in his private study, he sat with his eyes shut, breathing slow, pretending to sleep. Beside his hand sat an open briefcase. $10,000 in cash, a flash drive holding numbers that could move a fortune overseas. Bait. He had set this same trap dozens of times before, and not once had it failed to prove what he already believed about people. I think about that detail for a second. Dozens of times. That's not curiosity anymore. That's a man collecting evidence against the whole human race, one stranger at a time. He didn't know that tonight the door would open for a woman who was exactly $400 away from losing her home. Stay with me to the end of this one, because what this woman does in the next few minutes will break something in him that took 20 years to build, and what he leaves behind for her 10 years later will leave his own blood family standing in a room, speechless. The study held its breath. Only the rain against the glass moved. Kwang-suno kept his chest rising and falling, slow, even, the rhythm of a man with nothing to fear. He heard her shoes first. A soft squeak on hardwood, careful, like she was trying not to wake a sleeping bomb. He braced. This was the part that never changed. She would see the briefcase. Her eyes would catch the edge of those $100 bills, and her hand would move before her conscience could stop it. He had watched it happen so many times he could predict the exact second it would occur. The footsteps stopped beside the desk. Then something touched his shoulders. Every year of training in his body fired at once. His mind didn't think blanket. It thought wire. It thought blade. It thought someone has found a way past 6 armed men downstairs to put their hands on me while I sleep. His heart slammed once, hard, and his hand was a half second from closing around her throat. I want to sit on that half second for a moment. That's 20 years of survival living in one man's hands. That's what it costs to stay on top in his world. You can't even feel warmth without your body preparing to kill it. But the fabric was wrong for a weapon. Coarse, worn soft in places from years of use, not a garrote. Her cardigan, the one keeping her own arms warm a second ago, now draped over a man who terrified the entire East Coast. Kwang-suno didn't move. He didn't breathe right for almost 10 full seconds. He had braced for an assassin and received a blanket. And somewhere underneath the panic still leaving his body, something else arrived that he hadn't braced for at all and didn't have a name for yet. Kwang-suno lay still, eyes barely cracked open behind his lashes, watching through a blur of dark eyelashes and low lamplight. His pulse hadn't fully settled. Somewhere in his chest, the old rule he lived by was still repeating itself like a prayer he'd said too many times to believe anymore. People always show you what they really are, the second they think no one's watching. He waited for it now, the real test. The cardigan was strange, unexpected, but it changed nothing. She had touched him, draped fabric over a sleeping stranger, fine. But the briefcase was still open. The cash was still sitting right there, fanned out just enough to look careless. This was the moment. She would see it. She would think about her rent, her bills, whatever hole she was standing in, and her fingers would move toward it the way every other hand had moved toward it before. He pictured it before it happened, the way he always did, her hand hovering, her glancing at the door. The quiet slide of a few bills disappearing into a pocket. Mandy stepped toward the desk. Here it comes, he thought. Here is the only ending this story has ever had. Her hand reached out and closed the lid of the briefcase. Not opened it, closed it. The latches clicked, soft and final, like she was tucking a child in for the night. She didn't touch a single bill. She didn't so much as let her fingers brush the edge of the cash. She simply secured it, the way you'd close a door against the cold, and stepped back. I have to stop here for a second, because I don't think people understand what that click sounded like to a man like Kwang-suno. For 20 years that sound, money near an open hand, only ever ended one way in his world. He had never once heard it end like this. Mandy looked down at him, at the sleeping man she believed couldn't hear her, and she didn't see a monster. She saw someone shivering in a room that was too cold for its own good, surrounded by more money than she'd seen in a decade, and somehow poorer than she was. "You have all this security, sir," she whispered, mostly to herself, "but no one's looking out for your peace. Rest easy." Then she turned, picked up her broom from against the wall, and walked to the far corner of the room to keep sweeping, as if $10,000 sitting 6 inches from her hand was simply none of her business. Kwang-suno lay frozen behind closed eyes, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, his mind had nothing prepared. No prediction, no cynicism waiting to be proven right, just a single useless thought repeating itself over and over. She didn't even look at it twice. Something about that, the not looking twice, hit harder than if she'd cried, or thanked him, or begged. She hadn't needed convincing not to take it. The thought never seemed to cross her mind at all. He would have to decide in the next few seconds whether to keep pretending to sleep or finally open his eyes. And hey, before we go any further, where are you watching this from tonight? Drop it in the comments, I always read them. And if you're the kind of person who believes one small act of kindness can quietly change the whole direction of someone's life, do me a favor and hit subscribe before we continue. It helps more than you'd think. Okay, because Mandy has no idea what's about to happen next. The man on that chair isn't asleep at all, and in about 10 seconds, he's going to stand up, lock that study door, and look at her like she's the one thing standing between him and the truth he spent 20 years avoiding. Will he thank her for what she just did? Or will his paranoia destroy the one honest moment he's witnessed in years? Before Kwang-suno was a man people crossed the street to avoid. He was a boy from Incheon who came to America with his mother and one suitcase between them. They had nothing, but they had each other, and for a while, that was enough. His mother cleaned offices at night, the same kind of shift Mandy was working tonight, in the same kind of building she'd never be allowed to own a key to. She used to tell him, "Kwang-su, money is a tool, not a heart. Don't ever let it become the second thing." He believed her, back when believing things was still easy. Then the syndicate found him. Not the other way around. They found a sharp, hungry 17-year-old who could be useful, and they made him an offer his mother begged him to refuse. He took it anyway, told himself it was temporary, told himself he'd get out before it changed him. I think about that lie for a second, because almost everyone tells themselves some version of it. Just until things are stable. Just this one time, nobody plans to become who they become. It happens one compromise at a time, the same way a stone gets smooth, not from one big strike but from years of small ones. His mother died while he was still climbing, still telling himself he was almost out. At her bedside, she made him promise one thing. Don't let this life take your softness. Whatever you do, stay a person who can still be surprised by someone's goodness. He promised her. And then he broke that promise for 20 straight years, testing every stranger who walked into his orbit, watching every single one of them prove him right, and calling that proof instead of what it actually was. A man who had stopped expecting anything else. Tonight, for the first time since the funeral, someone had walked into his life and refused to prove him right. Kwang-suno opened his eyes. Mandy didn't see it happen. Her back was turned, sweeping the corner by the window. So when she heard the low growl behind her, every muscle in her body locked at once. She turned slowly. The sleeping man was standing now, fully awake, fully alert, watching her with an expression she'd seen described in headlines but never aimed directly at her face. Before she could speak, he walked past her and turned the deadbolt on the study door. The click of it landed in her stomach like a stone dropping down a well. I want to sit with her for a second here, because this isn't fear of a stranger. This is something older and more specific. This is the particular fear of a black woman working a graveyard cleaning shift, alone in a locked room with a powerful man, knowing exactly how these stories usually end for someone like her. It's not paranoia, it's memory. "You touch my desk," Kwang-suno said, his voice flat and cold. "A jade paperweight is missing, $15,000, custom, Joseon Dynasty. If I make one call, 3 armed men come up here and search you. People don't walk out of this building when they've taken something of mine." Mandy's hands had gone cold. Her mind raced, not toward guilt, because she knew she hadn't touched anything, but toward the eviction notice still sitting in her pocket, toward Amani asleep at home with a neighbor, toward how easily a powerful man's word could become her whole future being decided in the next 5 minutes. She thought of every story she'd ever heard about women who said, "I didn't do it," and were never believed anyway. She had 2 choices left: beg him to believe her, or stand there and let him see exactly who she was. Mandy's hands shook, but her voice didn't. "I didn't touch your paperweight, sir," she said. "I only closed the briefcase so your money would be safe. Check your cameras, search me right now if you want. I work hard. I don't take what isn't mine." Kwang-suno's finger hovered over the speed dial, close enough that 1 more inch would end this. He waited for the crack in her voice, the apology that turns into a confession, the thing he'd seen 100 times before. It didn't come. I want to stop on that for a second. Most people, guilty or not, start negotiating the moment a powerful man threatens them. She didn't negotiate. She just told him the truth and waited to see what he'd do with it. Mandy reached into her pocket. Her hand came out holding a small wooden cross, worn smooth at the edges from years of being held. "I don't have $15,000, she said, setting it gently on the desk. "But I know what it costs to lose something that matters. This was my husband's. He carved it for me before he died. If you think I brought dishonesty into your home, hold on to this until your cameras prove I didn't. It's the most precious thing I own. But my name is worth more than this cross, and I won't let you take that from me too." The phone slipped from Kwang-suno's hand and landed back in its cradle without him deciding to put it down. Something in his chest gave way, not loudly, not all at once, but like a wall that had been cracking quietly for 20 years finally losing the fight. "Take your cross back," he said, and his voice didn't sound like the man who'd locked the door minutes ago. "There's no missing paperweight. I was testing you. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, Mandy, and tonight I'm the one who has nothing." He sank into his chair like the air had left him. That night, Mandy left the penthouse with her rent paid in full, a number of zeros she didn't ask for and almost refused, and a feeling she couldn't name following her all the way home. Kwang-suno sat alone in the dark study long after she'd gone, her cardigan still draped across his lap. He held it the way you'd hold something fragile, and for the first time since his mother's funeral, he let himself cry. Not for a few minutes, but for the rest of the night, for 20 years of believing the worst about everyone he'd ever tested, and finally being wrong. 2 years later, Mandy left the cleaning company. Kwang-suno had asked her, more than once, until she finally said yes, to help him start something neither of them had a name for yet: a foundation. Housing for single parents who were 1 bad month away from where she'd been the night they met. She said yes on the condition that it never carry his name. He agreed, on the condition that her name be the only one on the door. 4 years later, the first building opened in Queens. 40 units, rent capped low enough that no one's child would ever lie awake doing eviction math. Mandy stood in the lobby on opening day holding Amani's hand, 11 years old now, taller than Mandy liked to admit, and didn't say much. She didn't have to. I think about that lobby for a second because nobody clapped when the doors opened. There was no big speech. Just a woman who used to mop floors for a living, watching other people get handed the thing she almost lost. Sometimes the quietest rooms are where the realest justice happens. 6 years later, Kwang-suno had sold off the last of the operations his father's generation had built. The ships, the routes, the things that couldn't survive daylight. What remained was legitimate. Logistics, the foundation which had grown 4 times over and now had Mandy's title on the door. Executive director. He still kept her cardigan folded in a drawer in his study. He never explained why to anyone who asked, and not many people asked twice. 8 years later, his health started slipping in small, quiet ways. A cough that didn't go away, weight he didn't get back. He didn't tell most people. He told Mandy. "When this is over," he said to her once, near the end, sitting in the same burgundy chair he'd been sitting in the night they met, "Promise me you'll keep the heat on in this building. All of it, even the rooms nobody's renting yet." She didn't fully understand what he meant. She would, soon enough. Kwang-suno Park died on a quiet Sunday morning peacefully in his sleep, at 62. By Tuesday, his penthouse library was full of people who hadn't visited him in years. His estranged brother flew in from Seoul. 2 cousins he'd cut off after the business went legitimate showed up in suits that cost more than Mandy used to make in a month. A handful of former associates lingered near the back, eyes scanning the room the way men scan a building they're hoping still owes them something. Mandy sat in the burgundy velvet chair, the same one. Nobody had told her to sit there. It was just empty, and her body had walked toward it before her mind caught up. I want to pause on that chair for a second, because 10 years ago a powerful man sat in it, surrounded by more money than most people see in a lifetime, and felt like the poorest person in the building. Tonight, a woman who once mopped this floor is sitting in the exact same chair, and for the first time, the chair finally has the right person in it. The attorney cleared his throat over the noise. The room quieted, reluctantly, like it resented being told to. "To my brother and to my cousins," he read, "you have the trusts already set aside for you, as the law requires. I won't pretend that's generous, it's simply what's owed." A few people shifted, sensing where this was going before it arrived. For the remainder, the real estate, the holdings, the foundation, all of it, I leave everything to the only person who ever looked after my peace when I had none left to offer for myself. I leave it to Mandy Emedike. The room exploded before the attorney could finish his breath. Her? The cleaner? This is a joke. He wasn't in his right mind at the end. Voices stacked on top of each other, loud enough that the attorney had to raise his own to be heard over them. "There's a letter," he said. He asked that I read it exactly as written. 10 years ago, I was a dead man pretending to breathe. Mandy saw a shivering soul in an expensive chair, and she covered him with her own coat, expecting nothing back. She taught me that real power was never about making people afraid. It's about who you choose to be soft for when nobody's watching. I leave her everything I built, because she's the only person I've ever met who understands that money's only real job is to keep the world a little warmer. In the back of the room, one of the cousins, a younger woman who'd said nothing the whole time, went still. Her hand twitched slightly like she might step forward, say something, reach for some version of decency that had been buried under the shouting. Then she pulled it back and said nothing at all. Mandy didn't move. She didn't defend herself, didn't look at any of the faces glaring at her. She just looked out at the rain falling against the glass, her thumb resting on the small wooden cross in her pocket, and let the room finish being loud without her years past. The penthouse that once held a locked study and a briefcase full of bait became the foundation's main office. The burgundy chair moved to a quiet corner where nobody sat anymore, kept there on purpose. Mandy ran the foundation until her hair started graying at the temples, and Imani, grown now with a daughter of her own, came on to help run the housing side. 3 more buildings had opened since the will reading. None of them carried Kwang-suno's name. All of them carried something of his anyway. One evening, a new cleaning hire was finishing her shift in the building's lobby. A young woman, exhausted, working nights to cover a gap in rent she hadn't told anyone about yet. She noticed an old, worn cardigan framed behind glass near the entrance, with no plaque, no explanation. She didn't ask about it. She just felt for a second she couldn't explain, a little less alone in the building than she had walking in. That, to me, is the real ending, not the will, not the empire. It's the moment kindness gets handed to someone who needed it, with no strings, and quietly keeps moving down the line to the next person who needs it too. Mandy never explained the cardigan to anyone who asked. She didn't need to. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I won't answer it for you. If you were the one testing a stranger's heart tonight, are you sure your own heart would survive what it found? If this one got to you, do me a favor. Drop a like, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs the reminder tonight. I'll see you in the next one.